It was such a dire threat to the United States that James Monroe in 1823 came out with his famous Monroe Doctrine. And the Monroe Doctrine was simply a statement to the powers that were in the Holy Alliance: don't come and colonize in the Western Hemisphere. If you do, America will view that as an act of war, and we will go to war with you. Thomas Jefferson wrote a letter to James Monroe in which he said that this is the greatest threat to America since the Revolution. So the men that lived during that time understood how critical these Congresses were and what a threat they were to the United States of America. The fact that we as Americans have been so asleep and in such a stupor and allowed this to happen, because we're seeing the fruits of those meetings today through the health care bill, through executive orders that are being passed that take authority out of the hands of the people and put it in the hands of just a very small few in Washington, D.C. John Adams wrote this to Thomas Jefferson. He said this about the Jesuit order. He said, "Shall we not have regular swarms of them here, in as many disguises as only a king of the gypsies can assume, dressed as painters, publishers, writers, and schoolmasters? If ever there was a body of men who merited eternal damnation on earth and in hell, it is this society of Loyolas." Steve, the Founding Fathers, for all of their limitations, they were men, they made mistakes, but they understood history. They understood that from the time of the inception of the Jesuit order in 1540 till the time of their suppression by Pope Clement XIV in 1773, that the Jesuit order had used intrigue, insurrection, and assassination to take over nations. Steve, the Founding Fathers of the United States understood that. That was why Thomas Jefferson and James Monroe and John Adams were so deeply concerned, number one, about the reestablishment of the Jesuit order in 1814, but even more so, the Congress at Vienna, Verona, and Cherie, because these leaders in the United States understood that the Jesuit order had been earmarked to be that group of men that would destroy Republican government in the United States and to seek to reestablish papal domination in our country. They understood that, Steve. That's why the Monroe Doctrine was written. That's why John Adams made the statement he did. And that, Steve, is why Samuel B. Morse, the famous inventor of the Morse code, wrote his two famous books, one published in 1835 called Imminent Danger to the Free Institutions of the United States Through Foreign Immigration, and his other classic book that he had published in 1844 called Foreign Conspiracy Against the Liberties of the United States. These men, Steve, understood that the Jesuit order would do whatever it took. Based on history, they would do whatever it took to destroy representative government in the United States, to destroy the middle class in the United States, and to destroy and take over all of the churches in the United States. And we are living today in that time, and we're seeing the fruits of those Congresses and the effective workings of the Jesuit order in this country.
So what do you think about, let's contrast for a moment, the scene in the 1800s when presidents like Monroe and Jefferson and Adams are against the Holy Alliance, namely the Pope and the kings of Europe, trying to infiltrate and control this country, destroy representative government. And today, when you've got presidents like George Bush, former President George Bush, and Obama and these others racing to meet the Pope every time they can, and actually bowing down to him on occasion. We've got pictures of that.
What we have in the United States today is we have the for the most simple, we have the ripe fig in the crystallizing of Jesuit takeover in this country. They take over, they produce their political leaders. George Bush was trained at Yale, he was a part of Skull and Bones. Skull and Bones is clearly connected to the man who started it in America, William Huntington Russell, had gone to Europe, had been in some Illuminati meetings in Germany, came over to America to start a chapter of Skull and Bones in America based on the Illuminati meetings he attended in Europe. And it's very, very clear that the man who created the Illuminati, Adam Weishaupt, was simply a Jesuit foot soldier. When he started the Illuminati in 1776, he was teaching at Ingolstadt University, a Jesuit university in a stronghold of Jesuitism in Germany called Bavaria. And the principles of the Illuminati are the principles of the Jesuit order. So you have the Jesuit order, you have the Illuminati, then you have Skull and Bones. And so the Jesuit order, through Skull and Bones, has crystallized their plan to train political leaders in this nation. George Bush Sr., George Bush Jr., both members of Skull and Bones, take the Jesuit agenda into the White House. And what is the result of that? What did you have? You have 9/11. And George Bush coming out after 9/11 with the New Patriot Act, which was actually penned by a Vietnamese refugee who has now come to America, he was trained at Georgetown, which is the preeminent Jesuit university in America, pins the New Patriot Act, which literally decimates our freedoms. So that now people will call me on the phone, Steve, and they'll say, "Did you write those books about those jays?" And I'll say, "Jays? I didn't write any books about birds." I wrote books about the Jesuits. Is that what you mean? Steve, people are afraid.
Right.
Because our liberties, our privacy, it's been taken over.
It's been gutted.
It's been
By
gutted.
this Patriot Act.
That's right. And so here is a man, George Bush, Jesuit trained, vows that he will obey the Pope and the Black Pope when he takes his initiation rites with the Skull and Bones at Yale, passing the New Patriot Act, which destroys your freedom and my freedom. In the prior to September 11th, George Bush dedicates a cultural center to John Paul in Washington, D.C., on the very soil where Abraham Lincoln was assassinated by Jesuits in 1865. But here, at the end of the 20th century and into the 21st, now we have American presidents. George Bush, at the dedication of the Cultural Center, he says, the greatest thing we can do to show our respect for John Paul is to bring his teachings into action here in the United States. So, Steve, we see this complete change from men back in the 19th century who understood the evils of Rome to whereas today you have George Bush with Skull and Bones giving his life to the Jesuit order. You have Bill Clinton, who was trained at Georgetown University. You have Barack Obama, who it's very, very clear has one Jesuit-trained member on his staff after another. The only one that comes to mind right off is Leon Panetta, who is the head of the CIA, who was trained at Santa Clara University, which is a Jesuit university on the West Coast. So Barack Obama is surrounded by Jesuit-trained men.
And his vice president is a Roman Catholic.
Joe Biden,
Joe Biden.
a devout Roman Catholic.
The head of the House is Nancy Pelosi, Roman Catholic.
Absolutely. In fact, when Nancy Pelosi was brought in as the Speaker of the House, she brought onto the floor of the Congress her Jesuit mentor, Stephen Privet, to address the Congress of the United States. The first time in American history that a Jesuit priest had addressed the Congress of the United States.
So the group vowed to destroy us are brought in, which may be indicating that they don't need to destroy us now, they've taken us over.
Absolutely. And Steve, the thing that's so very diabolical about this is that the Jesuit order controls both sides of the House of Representatives. I remember in the recent health care bill, as they were considering the passage of that bill, you have Nancy Pelosi, Jesuit trained, has a Jesuit mentor, and she's pushing for the passage of the health care bill. The man who was opposing it, which was the House Minority Leader, his name is John Bonner. John Bonner was trained at the Jesuit University. He's Jesuit trained. So they control both sides of the spectrum. Right. And we see that happening. This is the crystallization of Jesuit power and intrigue in the United States. It's controlling both political parties, whether it be Democrat or Republican, controlling both sides of an issue so that they can gain their synthesis. And that's what's happening today. And it all, Steve, is the fruits of and the byproduct of the Congress of Vienna, Verona, and Cherie. And instead of our political leaders today warring against it, as Jefferson and Monroe and Adams did, now we have American politicians who are slaves to the Catholic Church and the Jesuit order.
And I guess a lot of people are wondering why others in the Protestant arena aren't speaking out. The Billy Grahams, the Robert Schulers. Why are they not speaking out, in your opinion?
Steve, it's very, very clear from a statement that a trained Jesuit priest who escaped from the Jesuit order made his way here to the United States. While he was under oath as a Jesuit in his training, he was told something. The man's name was Alberto Rivera. In a little magazine, it's called The Godfathers, put out by Chick Publications, Alberto Rivera made a startling statement in which he said there would be a sign given to Jesuits throughout the world when all churches would be taken over by the Jesuit order. This was, and I'll read the statement to you. Okay. It says this, Alberto Rivera, the sign was to be when a president of the United States took his oath of office facing an obelisk. For the first time in U.S. history, the swearing-in ceremonies were moved to the west front of the Capitol, and President Reagan faced the Washington Monument. This happened January 20th, 1981. Steve, the Jesuit order was raised up to destroy everything that Protestantism had done. to destroy representative government, to destroy the middle class, but also, Steve, to destroy the voice